Welcome to Eddie's Variety Showcase. Tonight, we are given a second life. It is the beginning of spring, the end of a long winter lockdown, and the launch of some incredible new works by talented Scottish creatives who have interpreted the life and work of Edwin Morgan through a kaleidoscope of angles. We are also marking the end of the Edwin Morgan Centenary year. Why not make tonight a movie marathon? There's 14 new works up on the Edwin Morgan website under the Hold Hands Among the Atoms tab. I am Sian McIntyre. I'm the project manager of the Edwin Morgan Centenary, and I'm joining you from this intimate new queer bar in the Salt Market, Bonjour, Glasgow. We are also joined by Ian Morrison, who is hosting from the Fruitmarket in Edinburgh, and Shona McClintock, who is joining us from Eden Court in Inverness. Tonight, we will be enjoying performances from Eddie's friends, old and new, with readings from Edwin Morgan trustees including Chair David Kinloch, previous Chair and biographer James McGonigal, trustee and publisher Hamish White, and Robin Marsack, who has been the driving force behind the Edwin Morgan Centenary over the past 3 years and has tirelessly kept my punctuation and overuse of adjectives in check. And of course, the main event of tonight will be treated with some tasters of new creative works that have been enabled by the Second Life grant scheme, supported by Creative Scotland, the Edwin Morgan Trust, and the Saltire Society. We will begin with the chair of the Edwin Morgan Trust, David Kinloch.
Dear Eddie, to round off this year of celebration, I'm going to read one of your final sonnets from Scotland. It's called Outward Bound, and it encapsulates so much of what we value most in your poetry. The unexpectedness of your imagination, a lyricism laced by wit, an orientation towards the future, and a philosophically inclined sense of humour. May it inspire new poems by poets who have learned from your gifts. Outward Bound. That was the time Scotland began to move. Scotland move? No, it's impossible. It became an island and was able to float in the Atlantic Lake and prove Cranog's no fable. Like a sea-washed log, it loved to tempt earnest geographers, duck down and dub them drunk hydrographers. Shake itself dry, no longer log, but dog. Was it powered? On stilts. Amazing grace was found in granite. It moved on pure sound. Greenland twisted round to hear it. Key West whistled, waved. Lanzarote's ashy face cracked open with laughter. There was no ground of being, only being, sweetest and best.
Hello, I'm Ian Morrison, Partnerships Curator at the Fruitmarket. We're here today celebrating Edwin Morgan's 101st birthday, and we can't wait to welcome you to come back into our space in the summer. But for now, we're going to head over to Nazia Mohammed, who's going to start us off tonight by reading from the new divan in front of her second life work. Nazia.
Desire so great and ancient. 9. White sails and turquoise gulf, if these were all we needed. Sores where beggars were sit invisible on gate and wall. This daylight is a picnic of the trumpets. The visibles, the tray of the sky, slowly reeling its round of spiced meat at us, as welcome seeming as kings' feasts. Thousands are in hunger, see no glory, and all are in desire so great and ancient. Nothing heaven brings round, nothing behind or present or to come can fill their house with what they feel they need, or quieten them. Sigh into the sea. 52. The sea, the sigh, the song. In the blend, quays pile fresh timber. Events screech to make us less than master of this departure. A fabulous language veils you over the sound. Point Barrow, Puget, dockers daft. They grunt shavings over a scene composed like a paperweight snowstorm. The traveller throws his sigh into the sea, shrugs as he laughs at the rail, while the seaside saw whirls up its heaped debris, a floor of cast-off bandages curled in the hot Gulf sun. He hears the sea, he hears the sigh the light ones give, dislodged in flakes towards the roof.
Fes gyrmach argyn a ysfaltiodd of Eden Court an yn Inverness, far y fel sy'n gymach toliche a fi y corach ag yn blian y soriche hasio, a ys y gwy y colabri sonyd ag Edwin Morgan. Welcome to Eden Court, Scotland's largest multi-art centre in the heart of the Highlands. Sadly, we've been closed for most of the last year, but tonight's performances are a step in the right direction and we look forward to welcoming you back as soon as we can. Over to Kay, one of Eden Court's LGBTI+ social dance club elders.
A fuchsia. I rescued it 3 years ago from rubbish. Half dead, a limp, ungainly arc of ripped off green, it lay without a flower to recommend it. And somehow, like a spring or snake, it challenged the logic of the vertical, resisted potting, but I firmed it, staked it, waited. Sometimes it's bearish, sometimes bushy. Tries though. This summer, it decided to be bushy.
And let's hear from Clementine E. Burnley, joining us from Edinburgh at the Fruitmarket.
My day among the cannonballs. Europe is all wars. Its plains are drenched in blood. Treaties signed, treaties broken, forgotten. Empires bursting from the gun of history. Empires burnt out by the fires of history. Should we worry sitting here at peace? Of course not. Yes, we should. I don't know. I know I have fought, have had allegiances, but I am left with reminiscences, which are my best, least understood credentials. Let me lay one before you. Gather round. Come on, it's a cracker. You'll not find its like. My company was stationed somewhere in Europe. I don't remember the name of the grim town. We were besieging. It was well fortified, with gates, chains, embrasures, machicolations, batteries, redoubts, vigilantes, God knows what. A bristly sort of come and get me place we had tried in vain to penetrate. Logic, I said to myself. Think logic. We cannot infiltrate. What's left but up, up and over? What goes up and over? A balloon? Don't be silly. They'd shoot it down. There's only one way, and I should emphasize I was at the peak of my physical powers. A long time ago, yes, I know. I climbed up onto our biggest cannon, and when the next huge ball began to emerge, I jumped it like on horseback and was off, whizzing into the smoky air. Aha, I thought, this is how to do it. But then, halfway towards the enemy, I wondered, would they not catch me, string me up as a spy? Not good. I must get back. But back how? Logic again saw just one solution: transfer to the next enemy cannonball, coming toward me. A delicate operation, but I accomplished it, and so back home. Not the most glorious of episodes, I hear you say. Oh, but it was. Was the siege lifted? I really don't know. Did the enemy surrender? I cannot recall. What I remember is the exhilaration of the ball between my knees, like a celestial horse and the wind whistling its encouragement. And at the high point of my flight, an eagle, shrieking at the usurper of that space between ground and sky, between friend and foe, between the possible and the impossible. I shrieked back to the wild bird in my gladness. What an unearthly duet, but life.
And off we go to Eden Court to hear from Jenny Johnson from Stories of Scotland.
For our Second Life Award, Annie, my podcast partner, and I looked at old Scottish mythology and rewrote it with a queer twist. And in doing so, we wove together all these tales in this wonderful way that looked at Scottish history and mythology and love in a completely original way. And one of the favourite things that Edwin Morgan does that we took inspiration from is that he was able to deconstruct things that seemed fixed and then reconstruct them in his own imaginative and often joyous way. And I think there's no better example of this than in his poem, The Loch Ness Monster's Song. Schwaffle, hunwuffle, hunwuffle, humph, humph. Her
global. Plum blum, plum blum, plum blum, plum.
And here's Adrian Howard reading one of our poems from Glasgow.
This is the colour. Citrine is morning when it arrives too energetically. Plum is the night on approach. In between now and then there is something else, and flame is you when you get here. Amber warning I am not prepared for. Green is somewhere in between the two. We've spent a lot of time indoors. Pigeon blue is the colour of the walls, which I have absorbed. Slate is the sky after rain without interval. We would argue over grey forever. Canary is mischief made. Taupe is in all seriousness. Serious is needed as a comparison more than anything else. Flesh are your fingertips, milk are your teeth. Blood orange are my insides after splitting. Fuchsia is the colour of one as it extends towards another, but not quite. And what we make together is magenta. Seagrass is the colour of a thought before formed, whereas blush is more a feeling. Turquoise is totally uncoupled and falling apart. Citrine is morning when it arrives too energetically. Plum is the night on approach. Scrapbook. Seeing you all blousy in bed of a morning reminds me of your scrapbooks, as if your body, a picture, cut a little rugged and stuck a little crooked on the page. You lay down again as if blown over by the wind. There is so much pleasure in the motion of your edges. My own edges give me away, not the kind of erosion I'd hoped for, and I won't last the 10,000 years it'll take. Your dreams are a collage of images which make a body more surreal, a chest laid bare and a naked bum and a vista that stretches out beyond. Ask a rock and it'll tell you it understands time. You have to hang around for its transformation. It will tell you that it understands silence too, but you won't have to ask about that.
Holly Summerson is joining us from the Fruitmarket.
You never thought much of the darkness, did you? You wanted everything so open. I said it could not be. You laughed and shook me and pointed me and swiveled me to windows, doors, rivers, skies, said it must be, must issue right out if it was to have any honour. What? Love? Yes, love. It must seal up its burrow, must take a stair or two, a flight or two, for poles, horizons, convoys, elevations, but tender still, to backcourts and dim woodlands. Oh, never ask where darkness is. If light can break down the very splinters of the jams, be sure I know you can take in the sunlight through every pore and nothing will be blinded or shriveled up like a moth in flame or crippled by some excess of nakedness. Just give it your intelligence, your faith, I really mean, your faith, that's it. To see the streets so brilliant after gales, you really can go out there. You really can have something of that gladness. Many things under the sun, and not disheartened, so many in their ways going beside you.
Back to Eden Court to hear from musician Beldina Odeno.
Первые люди на Меркурии. Вы пришли с миров, мы с третьей планеты. Кто у вас лидер? Мы хотим говорить с ним. Powell, Стрэктор, Powell, Стрэктор, Howard. Это маленькая пластиковая вещь, точная копия Солнечной системы. Вы вот здесь, а мы вон там. А теперь мы с вами здесь. Вы понимаете? Гау, Хор, Пау, Абау, Ханна. Вот синее и белое с коричневым. Наш дом. Смотрите, синее называют море, коричневое суша, а белое над ними облака. Мы все живем на суше. Вокруг нас море, сверху облака. Мы это люди. Люди пришли. Гау, Бэннер, Гау. Люди пришли с миром. Люди с третьей планеты. Ее название Земля. Мы земляне. Кто у вас лидер? Земляне хотят говорить с ним. Землюди, Бау, Мосо. Вас лидер Хана, Харабост, вас лидер. Я есть вас лидер. Мы все побеждаем. Мы пришли с миром. У нас нет своих намерений. Все космические духи Стрэктор Хауэр. Все хораб Ханна Тантко. Тан пришли. Атом Стросо. Гаул вас лидер. На нашем харабан атомы мир Гаул. Людьба. Орабост из Тан Ханна. Мы знать люди. Бауэр Хосоп Тант. Бауэр. Мы знать вас лидер. Улетайте прямо образ Петер. Быстро. Мы не можем Табаур сейчас. Тантинко, образ Петер. Сейчас баба хапнет. Да, обратно, на третья планета. Вас лидер возвращаться на синее, белое, коричневое. Сейчас же, Ханна. Больше нет говорить. Гаулхан быстро хапнет? Нет, вы должны вернуться на вашу планету. Идите с миром, берите все, что нашли здесь, но быстро. Стрэктеора, Гаул. Конечно, ведь все меняется, ничто не вечно, не так ли? Вы будете помнить.
And now we're going to go to Edinburgh to hear from Hamish White.
This is one of my favourite Edwin Morgan poems. It's from the collection Hold Hands Among the Atoms, which was published exactly 30 years ago by Marscat Press, a series of poems he wrote for his 70th birthday. And this one is a study in black and white, one sentence, and as quite often with Eddie, it's contrary. A defence. I'm told I should not love him, the magpie, that he's a bully. But then I watch them bouncing along the grass, chattering, black and white, and he and she, twigs in beak, the treetops swaying with half a nest in a hail shower. The magpies, seeing off crows and gulls, a feint of mobbing, but who knows, eyeing a lost swan waddling down the pavement, off course from Bingham's waters. The smart, bright, bold, bad, pairing, caring magpies, whose nest was blown down last December, back now, to build again, to breed again, to bring us a batch of tumbling clockwork licorice all sorts, spruce, spliced, diced, learning to prance and hurtle through evening and morning sycamores with what must be something like happiness. The magpies, cocky, hungry, handsome, an eye-catching flash for that black and white collie to bark at, and the black and white cat lurking under the car bonnet to lash a bushy tail at. And this page, seeing these things, first white, now white and black, to pay its tribute to, and lay out thus its pleasure.
And now it's over to Glasgow to hear from Anjali Kadaraman Pule.
I'm going to be reading from the introduction of my zine, Opening the Cage, which is a workbook based on Edwin Morgan's poems. And so the introduction is called Making a Poem. Once you've completed this zine, you will have written and made 10 new poems. Poetry can be a collage of words, experiences, and images to convey feeling. I imagined this project as a series of in-person poetry collage workshops. However, it became apparent that this wasn't possible in 2021. Luckily, a physical zine allowed for permanence and a record of this project. Edwin Morgan was born in Glasgow on April 27, 1920. His first poetry collection was published in 1952, and he died in 2010 at the age of 90. He was Poet Laureate of Glasgow and the Scots Macha in his lifetime. He wrote in varied poetic forms, exhibiting talent and a desire to experiment. He had many scrapbooks that held collaged images and stories that interested and excited him. Collage is how I began to write my first poems in 2016. I mean that I used the words from internet pages, magazines, and from walking around and catching them. I'd sculpt poems out of large blocks of text that I had found, circling the words that I wanted. I felt I'd found a medium to express myself where I did not feel self-conscious. I was not bearing my soul too soon. More recently, inspired by Edwin Morgan's scrapbooks, I began to collage using newspapers and magazines, and I found these images bore a resemblance to the poetry I had been making. The prompts I've written are simply a guide. You don't have to follow the instructions closely, but if you want to, you can. Each prompt is a starting point, and I'm excited to see the images and poems that come from them. I hope that in completing these exercises, you're able to discover the creative possibilities in yourself and use the work of Edwin Morgan to guide you.
Over to the Fruitmarket with Robbie McLeod.
Oran Uil. Grach le de charach mi. Sua mi le de vinnigil. Gremich mi. Feilig mi. Rúsk mi. Het doelig mijn goortje is mijn goortje gus a spremias, gjald agus voer, vom herkach dlú jellik. Is mi a birkig nat live, maar gun jeug mi, is gun gein anal maar fomant bew, fé hun moment a tonish, nu a hokus du mi get a veel, is a vroelis du mi, is an blas agus cúriach gedréisju mi trot gaun, is mi a tuitjam, tuanjelach as machele. So hi mi sa volde nam oshan yunner, gat chet is tu dal shachet is suahig datran. I wil paar orst haast, ham a húlin a jersey.
Helen Sharman is joining us at Bonjour.
It is indeed myself. Will we get old? That's England, creeping long-armed in the crown and dripping beard, or it isn't. Whatever. Will we be kept later in boxes? No. Born too late for the archival turn. Behind the bars, it's not a nation, though I know you're thinking it. It's worse. The archivist, extremely morose, stares out of the window as mice run riot inside the photocopier. Halloween saw me coming. I live in hell, so keep going. Life's not a song, so keep going. Hell isn't life, so keep going. It saw me coming, saw me coming, Halloween. 3 young girls, standing on each other's shoulders inside a trench coat, take a long drag on a cigarette. You don't know what a man is until you have to please one. I feel guilt. I feel guilt. I feel guilt. I feel better, wearing my character shoes to the wedding in case I need to get into character. Like you, I have been talking about poetry. It is the poem that has suffered, or it waxes while the poet wanes. Thought bags at its own hanging edges as the squandered potential of the morning comes by in vague clouds of rain. It is the poem that needs you anyway, or it seeks a form that hollows out the old language and timing and boring agony of everything but turns it inside out like a glove. It is with my own voice that God will call me. God calls your name. Jean, Jean. Will we leave home? Creep out the close and kick over spitefully the crowding prams, our audience the rats and the worms and the rats again, chewing methodically through the boxes stored beneath the primary school. Will we ever regret our non-choice choices? No, born too late for the clamour of the yet to be born, our audience the rats and the worms. What, are you writing into the violence of your century? Ha ha ha. The unpolluted, the uncorrupted, the inviolate, the intrepid, super-celestial. You may well have moved elsewhere by now, but I hope this will reach you eventually.
Crossing over to Sequoia Barnes at the fruit market.
A little catechism from the demon. What is a demon? Study my life. What is a mountain? Set out now. What is fire? It is forever. What is my life? A fall, a call. What is the deep? Set out now. What is thunder? Your powder dry. What is the film? It rolls, it tells. What is the film? Under the falls. Where is the theater? Under the hill. Where is the demon? Walking the hills. Where is the victory? On the high tops. Where is the fire? Far in the deep. Where is the deep? Study the demon. Where is the mountain? Set out now. Study my life and set out now.
Edwin Morgan's friend and biographer James McGonigal from Glasgow.
One of my happiest memories of Edwin Morgan is seeing him play with a child's kaleidoscope. I used to take my children up to see him when they were top primary, lower secondary at Christmas, and he always had a low table with lots of little bowls with sweets and biscuits and so on, and also presents for the children. Little puzzles, Japanese and Chinese wooden and metal puzzles. And one year he had a kaleidoscope, so he used it. And I've always thought of him as a kaleidoscopic poet ever since, a kaleidoscopist. That's to say, he could look at the world and see it, and then just give a little twist, and then the mirrors and the coloured crystals make it take a new shape. You could look at his scrapbooks in that way, which are, multifarious juxtapositions of pictures and so on. But that's a kaleidoscopic way of looking at the world, and you turn another double page, and then there's another look, another colour. And his translations were like that as well, I think, looking at the world through the lens of a different poet. And I thought I would read one of his translations of a favourite poet of his, Attila Joseph. My mother. She would hold the mug in both hands. One Sunday, as evening approached, she smiled in her own peaceful way and sat a moment in the half-dark. A small saucepan held the supper she brought home from the fine folks' house. We went to bed, and I lay thinking how they had a whole pot to devour. This was my mother, tiny, early dead, A washerwoman's lot is to die early. Her legs shake from the loads she carries. Her head throbs as she bends, ironing. And her mountains are dirty washing. She has a tranquilizing cloudscape of steam. And as for pastures new, the washerwoman has the attic. She pauses with the iron. I see her. Her brittle body was broken by capital, grew thin, grew thinner. Think about it, proletarians. She was bent, you know, bent from washing. I never knew how young she was. She wore a clean apron in her dreams, and the postman greeted her then.
Now Lucy Cash and Luke Powell will be joining us in Edinburgh.
How can I acknowledge the power and the privilege and the pleasure and the pain and all the precarity I hold in my hands?
What happens when we walk where, as others have, alongside their ghosts, holding their fingers, tissue, palm, something of how they thought, fought to touch inside our own?
What sort of gesture is a collage? How do these gestures reveal Edwin Morgan's touching of the world? What do they conceal? What do they surface about the entanglements of sight and touch?
How do we touch in times of jeopardy?
Is it this? When I cut something out, do I see it more clearly? Like drawing.
Is the surface of a scrapbook more tender than a screen?
How might the way someone saw, caressed, composed, with paper cuttings, their hands on their desk, in their lap, bring us closer to their breath, their flesh, to fear, desire?
What does it mean to have a private life or private life?
Looking, longing, loving, now and then and now.
And now, your touch is touching.
Is in everything I read and write and try.
To hold, right now.
And now to Glasgow, Bonjour, Ishmael McFarlane.
This is a wee extract from episode 4 of the podcast that I made for the project. And here is my translation of that extract from Beowulf. Aebde kent there was ae dour wifey, minding on her pain, minding on her bad use. Efter a' the stramash was ower, it was Grendel's mither, sair quine. Unca besom, fu o dool, staying in the waters o dreed, the cold burns. Maybe it's our Scottish. Maybe it's our Ishbel. My wee French daughter is near enough fu up now. I'll be needing another. Another for me to put her drawings all hour. Maybe screevings next. Maybe letters. What would Morgan hae done wi' a wee and what needed to be collaborator? What couldn't he gie ye the week you were wanting for the dark o' screeving and fun and thinking and reading? In old age, he would sometimes express a wish he had bairns. To his friend James McGonigal, he said, other people have sons or daughters to help them, why don't I? He saw his words as wains, and He said, you can't leave children, you can't leave a family, but you hope that you are able to leave some of your writings to posterity. In a way, perhaps, they are my children. Aye. In a way, maybe May is my writings, and Tommy's and all. No just as metaphor, no just in the cantrip potion of DNA that makes a soul. I hear my ain words back, Tammy, frae her wee moo, translate it in a new body, adapt it. Nice cuddle, doggy, nice kisses. Ah, Mummy Baffy's on. You okay, Mummy? Oui, ma petite chouchou. Je suis fatiguée, mais je vais bien, merci.
Over to the fruit market with Sakai Machachi.
A renegotiation of time. In our enforced domesticity, there is a renegotiation of time. We awake, not always in the day, dream-worn and in chaotic bliss, we carry forth our inner impositions, the relationships we hold to the objects in our life. We are only us, the great indoors, windowsill, bedside lamp, warm carpet, dark moonlit cityscape through glass pane longing. There's no escape from all of this. Imagining a way out is futile. The country ticks on, the lived realization of the tacky posters, mugs, and flags that repeat to us in earnest words, to keep calm and carry on. Even when the whole damn thing has fallen apart, even when it's just too much of the same. Even as they chip away at freedoms hard fought and won, for what? If we could walk the streets at night, hands held open, asking for more or less of what we deserve. In these moments, I just sit still, eyes closed, concentrate on my breath, and try my best not to imagine worse. A renegotiation of time, as though time was ever a real dimension, felt and not just received as instructions on a flat red surface. The only thing that was real about it was the shadows playing. We are here in our homes, waiting.
And now, Vlad Butachea in Glasgow.
So one of my interests is in how technologies and art intersect. So for the second life, I trained an algorithm, a computer algorithm, to write poetry in the style of Edwin Morgan. I call it the Edwin Morgan bot, and for the past few months, it's learned and analyzed Edwin Morgan's poetry, and is now able to create its own. These poems are strange and abstract, and sometimes they're quite funny and clunky. They follow a logic and a language of their own, and I think that in some ways they do justice to Edwin Morgan's playfulness and to his linguistic experimentation. So I gave the machine the words "poetry is" to start from, and I've collated here a small computer-generated poem. Poetry is the streams of the gold, of the streams of the stars. Poetry is the streets, the last near stranger of the story. Poetry is the singing, life, grief, and speak on my smoke skin. Poetry is silence from the place, and the ready of the snow.
And now it's Callum MacLeod reading his brother Robbie's translations of Edwin Morgan's poems.
Suan Lar. Haroriav Suan Lar am. Marahurshin Yeska Horafut. Isia came na Hinika Rangi Osculture. Ri. Mogluin na Gleig do Gaglu. The trencher in Gorma na Dabu. The Suan Lar Jarsig. And solace Che na Green. Vukshin Shugeet. Cater chéile. Gun gres a chur son sé eile hiigich. Leine treintje in fallu a chlach cála. Leis an dá orc pasture, mar a chrawn mi ors. Millish san áret, et a magag arste réiksig mar faster, wat a bhío eski. Blas nam sún láir, nam chéine, sín an ríist, gavan gul ors. Búlig I grían ar dí chéine fat uarach gin chest gian ule, agus de jalan I sauri ar crauch gin Chilefatric, glanige gallion na treintje.
And now we've got Esther Swift playing the harp for us at the fruit market.
Edwin Morgan trustee, Robin Morrison from Glasgow.
I've chosen Edwin Morgan's poem, The Freshet, from his 2002 collection, which was published to mark his period as Poet Laureate of Glasgow. It's written, therefore, when he was in his early 80s or late 70s, and you would never guess that, I think. If I said it was partly in the language of flowers, you would think it would be sentimental, but it's not at all. These flowers are bold, they're mischievous, and they're sensual, just like the speaker himself. There's definitely a sense of looking forward, and that is so typical of Eddie. He did not like to look back. So here's the Freshet. Will you not brush me again, rhododendron? You were blousy with rainwater when you drenched my cheek. I might have been weeping, but was only passing too quickly. You were so heavy and wet and fresh. I thought your purple must run, make me a Pict. You made yourself a sponge for me. I got a shower, a shot, a spray, a freshet, a head start, and then I was away from you. I can't go back. I can't go back, you know, retrace my steps, tilt my other cheek out like an idiot, stumble purposefully against the blooms for another heady shiver. I want it, though. One day, when I'm not thinking, walking steadily past house and garden, measuring the traffic lights, you will reach out, won't you? At a corner, toppling over railings just to see me, crowd of mauve raindrops shaking and bursting, mauling me gently with your petal paws, shock of the petal, shock of the water. I am waiting for that. Out of I don't care how many pavements, black railings, and the darkly breathing green. Happy 101st birthday, Eddie.
Happy birthday, Eddie.
Happy birthday, Eddie.
Happy birthday, Eddie.
Happy birthday, Eddie.
Hola, Bresson, Eddie.
Happy birthday to Eddie.
Morgan.